two, one. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another exciting edition of Reality's Edge, the Doc and Buddy Show. Really glad that you're here tonight because this is the show where we explore the science of UFOs, the mysteries of the paranormal, and everything in between. So anything goes here. We appreciate you showing up to watch and listen, and we're going to dive into some really exciting topics tonight that I think you're really going to enjoy. So how are you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing great. I'm really kind of stunned by the profoundness of, our research perpetually. As we dive deeper into this stuff, we're not historians, we're researchers. So we're, actively investigating, talking to experiencers. You have an amazing video that you just put up. I think it's a very important and historic interview. And in some of our recent research, we just find the incredible stuff. And I have been given a bunch of documents, CIA documents, declassified documents, top secret documents that, declassified top secret documents that indicate clearly that the government and numerous branches of the government not only believe in the powers of psi, not just ESP, psychokinesis, and other abilities, but that they really fear these abilities. And this has been a consistent message for a long time, for over 40 years in the documentation.
Scary, very scary. Before we get into that, let me just say about the video you mentioned that I just posted today on the 27th of January. 2019. That's the first time that this video that information's ever been made public. This, just very briefly, this was a group of UFO witnesses in Wales, and Colin Andrews helped arrange a meeting for us with this group and someone who was a researcher out there, whose name I can't remember at the moment. It had to do with studying all sorts of UFO phenomena out in Wales. And one of the witnesses there, who I just uploaded the video today, was Ken, the policeman, who told us that fascinating story, former RAF serviceman too, in the Royal Air Force, of a big UFO that came over their town one night, flashing, pulsing, slowly coming down onto the golf course. Someone set up a telescope, and he said it was really bright with the naked eye of the telescope. It was blinding, his flashes. And they said, "Oh, you're a policeman, you can deal with it." Well, he said, "Luckily I wasn't on duty yet." But his shift started an hour later. He was happy to leave. Coming back the next morning from the shift at 6 a.m., he sees at least 8-foot-tall robot-like spaceman with its back to the wall of an agricultural college.
What?
In a suit, tallest thing he ever saw. And again, he was off duty because he had just, the night shift ended. And anyway, that's the story. He goes home and tells his wife, and she says, "You didn't see anything." That was the same time period where the Joyce Bowles episode happened with another man in the car, Pratt, near Winchester, where they're on the road near Winchester, UK. This happened near Bristol. And have you heard of this story? Their car it gets pushed off the road.
Yes, I have heard of this one.
Yes, and a very blonde-looking, strange sort of man walks up to the window and starts talking to them and tells them all these things that are about to happen and why they're here to protect us from environmental degradation, and mentions patterns in the wheat that will be showing up soon. And then they have control of the car again, and he's gone. And so anyway, it was around that same time period, and that's what Ken the policeman video is about. And I just say I've never publicized before, but I just felt, for some reason today, I felt today was the day. So that's it.
It's an amazing interview, and it's amazing for a bunch of reasons, and it made me think of a whole bunch of different things. Like in that time period, there was quite a few cases of giant robots, giant big things that didn't have necks even. The Voronezh case, the Umo case, of all those cases in Spain where they had that symbol. There was a robot that had the symbol on his belt that it was a 9-foot Umo robot. So endlessly fascinating, endlessly fascinating.
And they come in groups, buddy. These sightings tend to come in groups. Even around the world, people see similar sorts of things. You just really wonder, like, what is going on here? But
they're waves. It's like an educational wave. The whole thing is
the robots.
And you know what? They seem to be presenting themselves in a way that is technologically within our conception, just at the edge of our conception, you know, because if they presented us with something too wild, too strange, it would be too much for us. But it's real enough, just barely, you know, and throughout history, it's been that way. They've always represented near future technology.
Near
And
future. We've talked about this many times in the show. And I have to be honest, I think about this question almost every day about why it's always just near future. We'll get into it another time, but it's a great question as why are the UFOs always just a little ahead in appearance and so forth of our streamlined cars in the 50s and the jet, you know, it changes over the decades, as you're saying. So, we've got a little frozen situation here. Are you reading me clearly? Hold on, we've got some technical difficulties, folks. I'm not sure whose side this is. I just see a streamline. Buddy, you're frozen on my screen. 1 second. Frozen. Is it on my side or your side? Whoa, we lost him. Okay, hold on, folks. We will get him back in a second. Glad you're with us. So it's a really good question, isn't it? Why do the UFOs appear to change over they're so far ahead of us technologically? If it's a they, why does it seem to change over the decades if we're dealing with a civilization that's 100,000 years ahead of us? Or as Roger Allure told me, at least 1 million years. So you wouldn't expect a civilization 1 million years more advanced for their technology to change so much in 100 years. But it seems to have happened, and it's a good question. So, we've got him back. He's back.
Here. The whole thing just rolling, everything.
It's okay. So, buddy, I wanted to say one thing. At the end of this little video, it's going to get into the topic you're about to lead us through, the documents. You can hear Colin Andrews talking to Ken and saying, you know, Ken, sometimes when you encounter these phenomena, it can affect you in ways deep in your psyche that you didn't even realize at the time, and it can last for quite a while. And that's where it cuts off. But there is a connection back to all these psychic phenomena, strange experiences. I guess some people call it high strangeness. It's not a term I've ever been particularly fond of, but that's what some people call it, NIDS, and so forth. So what you posted a video yourself earlier today, which I just finished watching about an hour ago, and you have a treasure trove. I can only say a treasure trove of documents from the CIA, the NSA. These are public domain documents now, I would imagine. They are in the public domain. They are declassified recently, I mean, relatively recently, like in the past 10 years. Now, I have to say, buddy, I was aware that the CIA had a reading room that they made available to the public with. Over the years, they've been releasing, I think it was partly from the work of Russell Targ and others to get them to release these documents, right?
Yes, correct.
I believe that was true. And so they released remote viewing documents. They released some of the top UFO photos, which they say that they couldn't even make sense of. And we don't know quite what to make when they say something. And now you've got a chunk of these. And I have never seen these before. And I have to admit, maybe I'm a bit naive. I just assumed that all of it was already out. I mean, maybe I just assumed other people would have found the treasure troves by now. But now you have these documents that show that the U.S. government was concerned of the weaponized uses of ESP. I'm actually kind of shocked. I've never heard this before, beyond just a very cursory discussion. But you've had these very detailed documents. Do you want to show us what some of these are?
Sure. And just really quickly, briefly, just like the UFO story when they told us they stopped having interest in this, and then we found out they've continued the entire time. They haven't stopped for a second. Right. The same thing is true with ESP. They haven't stopped for a second. They've been highly interested in international programs, specific people. They've created all sorts of directives to handle the situation. They state empirically in the documents that it's been proven correct. This is real. There's a document to one of the directors, I think it's the director of the NSA. It's a briefing that says that ESP is real. This is some pretty hardcore stuff, and the implications of this are, fairly staggering.
Yeah, because as I was saying to you earlier today when we were talking about this, I mean, I believe it was Robert Gates who came on the Ted Koppel show in 1995 and said, oh, it never worked. It was just, we tested it, but there wasn't really any evidence anything was really successful. And we knew that wasn't true for those of us who are remote viewers who've been involved with this, because we've met Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, and we've talked to these folks and so many others, the viewers at the URVA conferences, right? The Lynn Buchanans and Paul Smiths and Ingo, even some of us. And we know they kept getting asked again. And as Lynn said, they kept asking us to do more sessions. You know what this is like, buddy. More and more. All the alphabet agencies, all of them kept asking. So Lynn would always say, if it didn't work, how come they kept tasking us with more and more sessions? All of the major alphabet soup agencies. So now we find out that we have documentation to prove exactly what Lynn was telling us, right?
Not only that, but it goes deeper and further than we suspected. It's not just remote viewing. It's not just seeing distant places and times. We're talking about psychokinesis. And then now we're getting into some very, very slippery slopes here for a bunch of different reasons and a bunch of questions we don't have all the answers to, and a bunch of ethical questions. There have been psychokinesis experiments that go to, how plants react to the mind, how plants react to death. Can plants be made sick? This is pretty scary stuff. Yeah. And I don't think we can underestimate the scary potential of this stuff. Let me just bring up a couple documents, if you don't mind. Hopefully my share screen function here will work, and I can dive into a couple of these documents. Here we go. Bingo. All right, let's dive into just one of these warnings. How about ESP threats? This one right down here. And there's quite a few of these threat assessments. Okay, this one was for the NSA director. Is that what this one was for? Oh no, this was from the NSA director. He wrote, ESP research has its dangers. 1, the personality of the psychic often becomes unbalanced. He is difficult. Number 2, the telekinetic phenomena associated with ESP can be destructive of equipment, especially electronic equipment. We know that very well. Stuff breaks around all the time. Some of these get very, very difficult to read. I think this one is about if they're clairvoyant, you can't keep them out of unwanted areas. So they also state like ESP can lead into other things like, Satanism and the occult. And okay, so that's just one of these supposedly dangerous aspects of being a psychic. Okay, so that was one threat. Let me go to this other threat one over here.
They're talking about a real range of psychic functions and abilities, or PK, and
they go into some real specifics in some of these documents that are pretty, some of these are 80-page reports too, so we can't necessarily go through all of them, but it's stunning. It'd be a pleasure to send any of this to anybody who would like to get it. This should be everyone's right to read this stuff. This was an NSA ESP threat assessment. Okay. Something about omitting some of the important ESP papers here. Okay, let me skip this if you guys don't mind. Approved for release. Cryptological aspects of ESP, declassified, exempt from blah, blah, blah. All right, this is the ComSec threat, aspects of extrasensory perception and telekinesis. Okay, let's try and scroll here so we can read this.
ComSec is, do you know what ComSec is?
No, would you please fill us all in?
Communication security.
And that is of what branch? That's the Department of Defense, ComSec?
It's a generalized term for military security. You know, you don't want your adversaries being able to listen into your CB radio. Right.
Communication security. So they talk about ESP concerns between, let's go into some of these things. Talked about evidence for the phenomena. They talk a little bit about Uri Geller for a second.
They do.
Yeah, the ComSec threat. Although at present, this is scary actually. Although at present, only very few persons are measurably gifted with ESP, the threat implications to ComSec are profound. This is true because studies of primitive people indicate that general ESP ability level within a society does fluctuate in accordance with the emphasis placed on the subject by the society. That's interesting. So if the society believes in that person more, they have more ability? Is
Wow.
what they found in some
general ability.
That's
general ability. That's the sheep goat thing that you were talking to Russell Targ about the other day.
Yes. Our present society is quite interested in this subject, and many ESP study and development groups have formed throughout the United States. The anticipated growth of ESP utilization not only threatens the security of the United States and friendly nations' communications, but the whole security structure, which relies so heavily on the ability to compartment and protect need to know. This blows that away. Well, we've always known that about remote viewing. A person with high enough developed ESP capabilities can disregard need to know, and few would probably be the wiser until, oops, I lost myself there somewhere.
Wiser, it's on the bottom, Few.
Wiser until it was too late. The psychic would probably not concern himself with guessing most cryptographic keys, but would attack the plain text directly, either in the mind of the communicators or the originators. Oh, interesting. That's a good angle. Thanks for the suggestion.
Wow.
Or in the plain text printed page. Yeah, that's easier.
I didn't even know that was possible. Okay. Now.
Yeah. They're talking about dice. Uri Geller's performance with dice seemed to be more of a threat to small cryptographic materials, such as nuclear command and control authenticators, just small things like
that's pretty small.
Nuclear control indicators. But with the advent of increased telekinetic ability, direct and subtle attacks against computers and computerized ciphers becomes a troublesome eventuality. With their high-level stress factor, command and control centers become particularly vulnerable to such attacks. You know why? Because they're full of such chaos and the entropy level is very high.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Buddy, what is the date what is the original date of this document?
I think, let me find out. Here it says 2011.
That's
Let me go to the release date. Yeah. Proof release. Let me go to the very end. This is a big sucker too. I mean, it probably says at the very first page and then at the very last at the end. Okay, I'm at the very end. Let me just skip up here. Summary. Wow, let me just read that conclusion for a second since we're there. That looked a little scary, actually.
Yeah, what did I see?
The summary.
Yes.
Uncareful use of either offensive or defensive psychic power is exceedingly dangerous. The fanatical Hitler experience, where a society of criminal leadership thrust open an occult horror chamber which cost over 50 million dead, should be more than a casual reminder that opening the Pandora's box of deep human power can unlock more than beneficial effects. But the lid is lifted and will not be closed. We must proceed with caution and integrity. It is my conviction that only the whole man can successfully survive in this world. This is the last frontier. The most challenging man needs all his powers and experience to be equal to the task. He must bring all wisdom as well as his science, his emotion. This seems like such a religiously powered conclusion, doesn't it?
The foundation, this is the spirit of life. Who wrote this? What are they talking about? Spirit of life? What do they mean by that? My interpretation of the spirit of life, or Buddha's interpretation, or is this some sort of fundamental?
Right.
Wow.
I have omitted some of the less important ESP papers. Dr. Murphy's challenge, if is a probability, if psychical research is probably a better survey of the than my, I can't read it, my theoretical paper, has given a tentative okay in paragraph 1 from Dr. Russell Targ.
Wow.
Senior research physicist, Electronics and Biography Laboratory, Stanford Research Institute, and someone of the parapsychology research.
President of the, yeah.
Oh, so it's all saying Russell Targ backed all this or something. That's really
But do we know who this is, who wrote this, or is this just a departmental?
You know what I kind of screwed up on is when this is it. This is the top page, so I'm not certain. All I know is that it has these numbers on the top. And let's see this first page again, if there's anything else on the first page. You know, there was also in here, here we go. Classified by blankety blank, exempt from blankety blank, declassify upon the originator. Let me see if there's anything else. It's a ComSec threat. It's a ComSec briefing.
Significant developments took place in 1972. Wasn't that when Pat Price and Ingo broke into the NSA facility in West Virginia?
Yeah.
I mean, psychically, they were both back in Palo Alto, but you know.
Yeah, accidentally.
Yeah, accidentally. They missed the target, the vacation cottage. They missed the target.
Oh, so I think it does have the name of the person. Hold on a second here. It said there, a crypto. Oh, they cut it out. See, there's a box underneath it.
It's been whited out.
Yeah, cryptological aspects of ESP. I wonder if this is
redacted. Yes, because so there's parts of this we don't see. This is an amazing document. I have to say, this is quite because you know, buddy, Russell always said that once they had read the cryptographic keys at the Sugar Grove facility in West Virginia, that all hell broke loose within the national security apparatus, because that was pretty damn serious. It was a facility for listening to Soviet satellites as they went overhead, and it was, you know, you don't want anyone to know how well you can do that, or they're going to change how their satellites work. So this was a really serious event, and I imagine that this paper, since they mentioned 1972, was a reaction to that event, wouldn't you?
I would think this is definitely post all that. It talks about certain events that makes me think this might be early 80s.
Right.
So it's retrospect of that stuff, which makes sense post the beginning of SRI and all that stuff. And it sounds like where this is it's interesting on so many levels. It has an assessment. If you look here at one of the syllabuses inside of it, it talks about the potential threat of psychokinesis to ComSec. So I can go to page 81 and find out what those are. It says defense against ESP.
We saw a little bit of that. I caught the word boredom. It's always a good defense against anything is boredom, right?
Right.
Bore them so they just get tired of doing RV, right? They're just want to go home, watch TV.
You know, just for fun, before we leave this document, this has so much great stuff in it, but I think there's other ones to check out as well, too, for a bunch of different reasons. Let me go to 81 really quick if I can find it.
Now, again, just as you're scrolling through, this is a document. This is technically available to anyone, not just you, your sources.
I believe it is.
Sanitized copy approved for release. So, oh, wait a minute. There we got some names. Dr. Hans Bender. Sure, he was from Freiburg in Germany. Interesting. Are these recognized experts in the field, or people that contributed to the research for
the research in that section? Now they're going into early Soviet research here, Moscow, a bunch of names, dates, places, people, Leningrad, the different groups involved, some of their theories.
There's a redacted section. Yeah.
Oh, there's a few places where a lot of names were taken out.
Oh, I can see that. Someone's no names, yeah.
Well, interesting.
Computers, control of entire populations. Jeez, wow.
This is interesting. A successful telepathy transmission of 12 out of 25 pictures from Moscow to Novosibirsk. Wow, that was nice. A successful telepathy experiment in which the hypnotized subject was made to fall asleep or awaken in 4 out of 5 tries. Doc,
that is mentioned by our friend Russell Targ in his book, The Reality of ESP. I think the Russian physicist in charge of that, Vasilev, I believe his name was. Russell described it, I just read it yesterday, that the idea was to remotely make subjects fall asleep or wake up. They had them in these kind of electromagnetically sealed tubes, and they would have them press a bulb to push air in and out, right? And when they stopped doing that, they know they'd fallen asleep. And in the book, Russell says they could repeat this within a minute. The subject would fall asleep or wake up again, and based on the intent of the sender in a totally different building or far away.
That's so funny. It reminds me of something that happened this past summer. I was on the phone with Super Sleuth, who's my good buddy, and have a bunch of relatives over at the house, and they're all loud. You know, they're all being loud, loud, loud. And they come over, and it's still daytime. It's not night yet. And they all go into the living room. I tell Super Sleuth, gosh, I wish they would just go to sleep. I just got so much stuff to do. I just wish they'd go to sleep. And she's like, don't wish them, About 10 minutes later, I open the door, and all four of them are asleep, and it's during the day. This isn't like it's sleep, and I caught odd that they all, they were tired. It was an 1.5-hour drive, but
so if we scroll down a little bit, we see a little more about a nationwide telepathy experiment. I mean, this is just incredible.
A very, very unethical thing to do.
Yeah, I'd say so. We are getting some screen freezing again, I'm afraid. Well, this is quite a document, I would say. Let me communicate here. Oh, we lost him. Well, boy, these, we've never really heard about the extent of these Soviet ESP experiments. I haven't. Maybe you've heard of them. I'm really quite amazed that they would carry out nationwide telepathy experiments. I mean, I can see why the people in the US military were quite concerned about this, given that it could be effective. And remember, they started the SRI program to disprove this whole area, which they couldn't. It turned out to really work. But we're seeing some very interesting, details there in this document. So, geez, I really wonder where this document is. This document is from. I'd like to get my own copy of it. But in any case, well, we're hearing that Buddy's having lights flashing in his house. Of course, I'm not surprised. It's them. They're trying to stop the broadcast, but they won't succeed. So everyone, put your mind power back to get Buddy back. And we'll all intend him to show up again on our screen. I know you're watching this later, but it'd be retrocausal. So pray to, his computer is restarting. This is a Windows computer, so this is going to take a second. Oh, he says fast. Okay. But I have to mention something here in relation to these documents. And I've mentioned this before, so this isn't the first time, but I was told by a former Department of Defense official, now retired, that he was aware of U.S. monitoring of a Soviet PK experiment in 1976, where they were attempting to bend a spoon from 1,000 miles away. Now, you just showed in one of those slides of some sort of experiment from 66, it said there, from Moscow to Novosibirsk. I'm not sure how far away that is, but that might be 1,000 miles. It might be the same sort of setup they were using in 76 to bend a spoon. And this individual told me, and I'm allowed to talk about this, that it bent. They all were listening in, and it definitely bent, but they never told a single person out of sight of that room. I guess until I was told about it. They didn't tell the remote viewing unit. that the
Wow.
Soviets could do this. Now, I asked Lynn Buchanan, were you ever aware of this 1976 Soviet PK experiment? He goes, well, not that one in particular. We were aware that they had people over there that were very good, but he said we could do it too. So you can imagine this sort of psychic arms race for real. I mean, they're seeing this and they, you know, you just imagine going through their minds bending something at 1,000 miles. I mean, think of the implications of that if you're involved in, you know, national security.
Terrorism. Yeah, if you want to, you could bring down Air Force One. You could bring the worst things possible.
Exactly.
It gets much deeper, Doc. The rabbit hole gets uglier.
Go ahead.
It is a series of experiments. Not only the Chinese, but the Russians did the same exact experiment, basically, where they took wooden matchsticks and put them inside essentially film canisters, and people were able to snap them. They were more snapped with groups, like you're saying, which is one of the things that stood out to me. And then when you say that about that experiment, it becomes more, I don't know, impactful to me. But also some individuals, rare individuals, a couple individuals are cited as being able to do everything at a statistical, you know, increase than the others who are good even. So there's some super talents. You know, there's the baseline, everyone has a talent. There's people who train up and get to a level ahead of the average, you know, person. And then there's just super talents, natural super talents. And that's the kind of the structure that they perceive. In fact, when we got cut off again, I just want to explain to the viewers, I'm very sorry about the cutoffs in this episode. We've had a bunch of electrical problems, just like we've been talking about. We were just talking about a minute ago, the director saying that it causes electrical problems. And of course, we've had like 10. So I apologize, but I'm going to air this episode anyway. And I hope Doc will too, despite the technical errors, because the content is so kind of, I think just really important to go through. Let me share screen again and try, Doc, to get this stuff back again. And hopefully we won't have any more of these kind of errors messing with us. Okay, so here's where we were before, right? I believe. Can you see everything, Doc?
Yes.
Okay, at the bottom of the screen, it says, a nationwide telepathy experiment is to be carried out within the next few months. And it has a little number there. It looks like 1967. Oh, 04-1967.
Yeah,
I would love to find out the results of that. All Soviet citizens have been alerted to this test, which will originate telepathic transmission from Moscow at scheduled times. This test has been characterized by CIA as a nationwide talent hunt. Fascinating.
I get it.
I get it too. Fascinating. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. Of the laying of hands, the implications on psychotherapy and the placebo effect. There's just so many crazy stories too in some of these things. And we haven't even touched the Chinese stuff, which is stunning. There's one of these documents where a scientist goes to Russia and goes to all the different institutes to check out the best of the best. And he comes back and he's debriefed by the CIA and he's blown away by the stuff that he saw firsthand. He was convinced, you know, there was no trickery. What's her name again? Kulgina, that woman, the Kulgina experiments.
Yeah.
EEG. What? I saw some with dead people? What the F? Hold on a second. Wait a minute. Okay. Okay. During the Kulgina experiments, a new device called a wireless EEG, it must be an electroencephalogram. Is that what that is? I don't know. Was used to detect some sort of energy pulsing around Kulgina while she was demonstrating the PK effect. Other reports indicate that these same rather sophisticated devices had been used to test clinically dead people. When ordinary EKGs and EEGs register nothing, these detectors register some sort of energy. Dr. Abraham Hoffer and Dr. Harold Kelm of the University of Saskatchewan are doing similar research with devices very similar in design. Wow. Western observers report that the best parapsychological work done in the Soviet bloc countries was being done in Bulgaria by Dr. Ezganov. He's been in the field for 30 years. He claims a high level of support and possesses the only nationalized psychic in the world, Vanga, who is famous all over Eastern Europe and even the USSR. Vanga. Lazanov is reportedly to have institutes all over the world, India. Interesting. I want to find out more about Vanga, a famous psychic. And this machine too sounds fascinating, doesn't it?
Well, you know, Ingo went there. Ingo went there with Bevy Yeagers, and they got to meet a lot of these people. And you remember Ed May wrote this book, ESP Wars, East and West, published a few years ago.
Yes.
They talked with, after the Cold War ended, they went over there and talked with a lot of their counterparts about, you know, what they had found and what would work and what didn't work. And so,
in fact, Ed May in one of these documents is cited. This was a CIA document. Ed May did some work with Ingo Swann about random number generators, and the CIA was very interested in their success in Ingo's level and in the experiments. I'd love to show you that in just a moment too. But I thought this was a couple interesting little lines about these different scientists. One thinks that time is the carrier of the telepathic information. Beats me. Fascinating. You know, let me find that other document. This document is still not done. There's tons more stuff in here. Filmed experiments.
With me again? I lost it for a second.
Excuse me?
Can you share your screen with me again? I can't see it.
Oh, no. Is it there?
There, I'm back. Okay, I got it. Got it.
Oh, beautiful.
Wow, look, there's a lot of redacted sections there. What was that again? Go back.
This was Kulgina, Nina Kulgina.
Yeah. She was their famous psychic.
Yeah. Wireless EEG done with her. I guess they're hiding the names of the report, maybe.
The names of the report. These are classified names. So
interesting. 69, 70. Testing for cryptological. The purpose of ESP experiments herein described is threefold: to determine what human extra-perceptive capabilities, temporarily categorized telepathy and clairvoyance, could have an effect on ComSec. So this is the, you know, they're looking for the threats. Some of the prime targets would be code and cipher key materials. Interesting. They want to know what factors enhance the phenomena, which is a logical thing. They want to find talented subjects. So if those things can be determined, of course, they want to find defenses against these things. I'm just click to this just really quickly.
They talk about the decline factor there. That's interesting. Yep.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And that's something a lot of people don't know about. You want to explain that to the general folks? Because I think a lot of people think, you know, once you're ESP, or, you know, it's always perfect. It's always one level, or, you know.
Buddy, this is a subject that comes up at every conference I've been to about these phenomena, which is that often in the beginning you get these outstanding results from the point of view of the researcher who's interested in finding a result. I mean, you should really be neutral, but obviously when people study this, they want to see that something's there if they put a lot of time into it. And you find that the effects decline after a while. Apparently, well, there are many reasons. One of them is just boredom. If you're just using a simple psi tester, forced choice, you know, which one of the Zener cards is going to show up, right? The wavy pattern, the star, the square, right? That becomes boring after a while, and you get a decline.
Even your subconscious gets bored, and it's hard to make your subconscious bored.
Gets bored, saying this is, you know, I can hear Ingo saying, hey, I can send my mind anywhere in space and time. This is a trivialization of my abilities. Right?
I love the line he said, you know, they said, can you read this image that's in the other room? He's like, if I wanted to read the image in the other room, I'd just go over and open the door. Why don't you test the real abilities? Go somewhere far, you know?
If you want to see what's in the box, open the box.
Open the freaking box, man. So there's a lot more of these tests here and results with codes. They were trying to guess codes. They tested individuals versus groups. Let's just look at a couple of the conclusions. Since the controls of the experiment were not considered stringent enough to eliminate all possibilities, it must be concluded the testing method was only possibly an acceptable vehicle. Doesn't just give the actual results. Oh, fairly, so let's go. Significant. Okay, so better than average. Oh, they did know better than average. Those two did. Fully controlled conditions. So if anyone, this stuff is really interesting. If anyone wants to read it, I will take the burden on myself to send to as many people want it, because this is, I think, important information to know. Do you mind if I jump into another document? Even though this one has so much more to go, as you can see, there's stuff on all sorts of different types of stuff.
You know, what is that? Well, what was that back down there? There was some sort of chart of casualties.
Yeah. All right. Oh, here we go. Attack, target, killed, men, women, children. Let's see what this is about.
What is that for?
I think this is for determining codes. So it's psychics trying to read the different codes, what they mean. I think that, gosh, this mouse is so sensitive. It also, it looked like it showed some test results too down here. Oh, here we go. Target killed, men, woman. Participants, testing group. Oh, it told you who the
look at that.
I wonder who some of those names were, Doc, because we know a lot of the best psychics from that era. And that
a lot of the best, and we want to know that they told us the truth about what they've been doing. Right?
Yes, and if they were involved in experiments that actually hurt plant life or
shrimp, as you mentioned to me, shrimp.
Yes, there's a stunning one of these in here that we were looking at earlier, where they found out that shrimp dying next to a plant has a irrefutable effect on the plant. Pretty stunning.
And a psychic effect on the plant. It's not a release of chemicals in the water or something.
No, it was a physical effect, and it was a repeatable effect. It wasn't a esoteric effect. I mean, it was a metrical.
Not trivial. So keep your shrimp happy. This is the moral. Don't be mean to those shrimp.
That's for sure. But what it also means,
I just have to say, I'm just so surprised again. We talked about this morning, and it's been released. It's obviously been declassified, but I haven't seen any discussion of this document until you pulled it out of the magician's hat for me this morning. So,
and the implications of all of these studies is stunning. Let's just think about the shrimp plant thing just for a second. It sounds stupid. It sounds ridiculous. But the implications of just that study alone says that life feels life. Life is connected to life. You know, in the past, we've talked about how we're connected to everything in the universe. And yeah, it's pretty neat to be connected to non-physical objects like a remote viewing target. But to know that we're literally physically connected to all life, there's some responsibility in that. You know what I mean, Doc? It's not just a novelty. There's a responsibility. And that's why I think, when people who pursue this stuff, if you're a good altruistic person, you gravitate to healing, because you think of that as the highest expression of these things. Wow, did my meeting get dumped again? My computer's doing
No, you're still with us, but your screen is
doing all sorts of cool stuff. That's awesome. Let me see okay, we're back. All right. So, Doc, there's a responsibility in this.
Well, yes, there's a big responsibility. And this is, we're seeing this from a narrow national security set of criteria. And national security institutions look for threats. This is what they all do. It doesn't matter what country, they all do the same thing. It doesn't matter whether it's Russia, China, United States, Iran, anyone. All those institutions are always looking for threats. That's sort of what they're paid to do. And we're kind of seeing it through that lens. I haven't seen any negative consequences of this in the people that I've taught. I have to say, I've seen people start spontaneously do channeling. People who never did it in their life, voices would start coming through them, but they kind of got used to it and felt like it was okay. People started, it was kind of like what Kevin Day was talking about with the Nimitz in this roundtable discussion that we were talking about this morning. That's available from the UFO News Network on YouTube. I've encountered people that started spontaneously drawing and painting beautiful works of art who never did this before in their life from taking an RV class. So I've seen unexpected consequences for people, but I've never seen any negative consequences. No one's ever, honestly, I've never heard anyone say, this is so bad, I'm really sorry I learned this. Everyone feels like it showed them another side of themselves that they didn't know was there in one way or another. A lot of people. So, but this is very negative, what we're seeing here. It's very negative.
It's a very cynical perspective on it.
Very cynical. Yeah.
it all reminds me of this analogy I keep coming back to. It's like humanity is a teenager, and we're about to be given the keys to the car. We're about to turn 18. And when you turn 18 and you get the keys to the car, you get to the keys to travel, to leave the planet, anti-gravity and all that stuff. When you get the keys, you have a bunch of other responsibilities that now come, and ethics that come flooding onto your shoulders. And to accept the reality that your mind affects things around you, and that life affects life, that we're all connected, there's a responsibility there. You can no longer pass the person who's suffering next to you indifferently, because you are connected. All these things, there's a responsibility in all this stuff, and it's fascinating. But
responsibility, and we're not talking about the military responsibility. We're talking about the average citizen being responsible for how they employ whatever tools they have around them. We all know things that are dangerous, but they can also be used in a beneficial way, like cars, right?
Right. Fire.
Yeah, fire, cars. There's a long list of things that fit into this category. But when we're seeing it here, it's just from a very concerned, almost paranoid perspective. I just want people to keep that in mind, because the experience I've had with it has been entirely positive. I'm sure you feel the same way, buddy. I mean, almost everyone we know who's been involved with this has just learned a lot about themselves and how the universe works, and come up with some very startling observations about how things are connected in ways that you never would have thought if you had just relied on traditional Western education, right?
It draws a parallel to the ET phenomena as well, because the same kind of tactics of suppressing this information by the government, the same kind of consequences of accepting this bigger, greater reality that we're all entitled to know about. There's all these things that make the two concepts very, very similar,
Well, we have to remember, let's just remember that, having heard Skip Atwater lecture about this, and he was one of the people from the inside of the military security, apparatus, kind of like counter security measures to see how vulnerable facilities were to, hostile intrusion. You could imagine people like that would have been very concerned that everything they had done would be for naught if you had psychics somewhere back in behind the Iron Curtain affecting your computers and your devices and sabotaging things and reading your crypto keys and your ciphers and all of this. So I understand their concern, and we have to keep in mind we're reading it from that point of view. This is not a document that was probably ever intended for public consumption and discussion, right? From the point of view that you and I come to it was, how can this benefit the average person in their life, right?
Yeah. And think of it this way. This going to sound a little nutty, but the more you realize that minds have the ability to literally do incredible things, people can use that notion to do very creative, dynamic things. What if 50 people got together and decided to concentrate on the ill health of our president? Right. Or what if, and these are in another country, it took less than that for 9/11 in the whole scheme. What if, there's all these different things in it. It just opens up a whole new future, and it reminds me once again.
It's true. They didn't know at the time. I mean, let's say 50 people could get together and do that. That would be, alarm bells would be going off, right?
Yeah, or affect his mental capacity, make him seem goofy, or tweet more often.
Yes, we need more tweets from the commander-in-chief. I don't have enough of those.
But there's one hopeful thing in here, and it seems like an inevitable direction that we're going. As these abilities come out more and more, society claims them more, people claims them more, but technology gets more and more powerful. We know that transparency is going to be the one thing I think that saves us, that saves society. Transparency, powerful thing. We can find the lone wolf, who's trying to, use a nuclear weapon, or we can find the 50 people who are coming together trying to think of the ill health of our president. There's this transparency that comes from being connected to the lineman, what I call the lineman, other people call the Akashic record, or the source, the oneness, the program, the place where RV comes from. When you tap into that, there's this wonderful transparency. So maybe, I have nothing to fear from transparency. I love it, but you know that some people, like the military and the government, don't quite feel the same way. They'd
Well,
rather know what I'm doing rather than me the same. Them.
Lyman, are you talking about key lime pie?
No, 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 and not the
No, the
lineman on
lemon, the lemon,
football.
subliminal, the limit. Yeah,
Isn't that what's in Sprite?
I'm
It's
kidding.
lineman.
I'm kidding. That's what it's called. It's not a word everyone's familiar with. It's the root of subliminal is the limen, the limen, how you pronounce it. It's the threshold of awareness, the threshold of awareness.
Yeah, it's a place where no measurements can take place, essentially.
Yeah, well, this is fascinating stuff. So we have another document here, and this is concerns about ESP, and they should be isolated by type and quality.
Check this out.
Within
this an NSA document, okay? And
yes.
They want to find out the people within the NSA who have these abilities, that they should be isolated based on their specialties, by their type and their quality. And if you scroll down here, you'll see after these gifted people are isolated and tested for the quality of their gifts, they should be tested against communication systems and consec systems to check out vulnerabilities. Here's an interesting one. Any person with telekinetic powers or problems should be isolated and studied to determine what triggers the capability, intensity, damage, everything else. Here's where it starts to get really fascinating. Number 5, a cadre of talented, synergized, gifted people should be formed for special problem-solving tests. They're looking to form the X team, basically the X-Men.
X-Men, wow, here it is.
This is concerning. Now, this was a top secret NSA document, you can see. The number of high-grade talented psychics of various types should be isolated by type in their individual names and locations listed, especially in the US, Europe, China, and the Soviet and Union and bloc countries. They want to know who we are and how good we are and which one of us. So you can be sure, Doc, there's a number by your name. You're being tracked by the NSA, my friend. Me, I'm not, because I've erased that in the computer there.
Yes, well, I'm going to use my PK abilities to psychically redact all of the information about me. We're just going to turn those ones and zeros into random bits.
Or we already did.
We already did. It's already done. Poof.
So they talk about the need to discover defensive capabilities. They talk about testing people for psychological and all sorts of other aspects because they don't want to have to deal with a dangerous or unscrupulous psychic.
What was that about? There was one other thing, a couple more lines there about screening out people that are conscienceless. So they're talking about people without a conscience, so sociopathic people.
Yeah.
Severe mental illness. Yes. Wow. What a document. I would have thought somewhere along the line after about 15 IRVA conferences, International Remote Viewing Association, that this document would have come up just as proof that the government took it seriously. I mean, if you mind, buddy, there's always this counter argument from skeptics that the government didn't take it seriously, that there was no proof that it was real. And now I would say this is a smoking gun document right here. This is a smoking gun document that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt, assuming it's not a forgery, which doesn't be any evidence of that this proves that the security organizations were extremely concerned about the implications of all of these psychic
at the highest level of government,
at the highest level
of intelligence. I wanted to see if we had seen this document or not. Oh, this looks like it's 1963. ESP, a threat to ComSec. Did we already see this one?
No, I didn't see this one. This is interesting. What is this? So,
this might be the one. Let me back up to the beginning. I'm sorry. Extrasensory perception. Let me go all the way back. Okay. All right. What about the key something to through the right PAT files? The right PAT files here. What about
right PAT files? I knew people would come across these someday.
I've been talking about right PAT, the basement of right PAT for a while. There's some very interesting stuff.
The Blue Room, huh?
I happened to do a little remote viewing that's hidden on the internet somewhere.
I see. Even Barry Goldwater couldn't find out what was in the Blue Room, huh?
Okay, so let's check out this. Oh, this was the stuff about a notion that all life together creates a larger organic entity.
There you
General
go.
thoughts on the relationship. According to Einstein, there is one absolute, that all things exist in relation with something else. All things are oriented as a first principle of existence. It is only in the instance of interpenetration of one into the other that the relation comes to be and also becomes more than what it was. The relationship. So it's basically talking about this theory that we're all one, we're all connected, everything's connected. It goes into protons, neutrinos, it goes into some stuff like that. It seems very fluffy to me. Goes into some other stuff. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
This is fascinating. Cleve Baxter, there he is.
Baxter.
Yes, now for our listeners, this is the Mr. Baxter, who experimented on the secret life of plants and plants' ability to feel feelings depending on how you treat them. The moral of the story was be nice to your plants because they can sense what's going on around them and react and communicate with each other, and you don't want them not to like you. So,
that's exactly right. And the funny things that are kind of just discovered in here is that the plants don't mind when humans are hurt unless they build a relationship with the human first. Okay, so fine. This sounds stupid.
No.
Here we go.
What is this? How do cats and dogs find their way home?
Oh, this is the shrimp thing.
Well, that's always been a good question. We've heard cases when they go across the United States and find the owner again.
In one experiment.
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, this is something you always hear about, these stories of cats and dogs finding their owners who've moved and, after
hundreds of miles.
Hundreds, even thousands of miles. So how do they do that?
Let's scroll down and find out.
Maybe the secret's right here, buddy. Maybe.
Could it be that he is following the direction of the intensity of the relationship bond, just as the salmon would swim upstream to its birthplace? Has salmon formed a relationship with its birthplace? Does it follow connection bonds in the relationship in the direction of increasing intensity to the point of origin? I think it's important to go backwards a little bit because they're talking about this bond that's created between things. Up here before, it says that plants don't react to human cells getting injured somewhere. Here we go. More than this, plants, I'm sorry. Baxter discovered that threats or destruction of any life, even lower life forms, cause the plant to respond. More than this, plants can become jaded in response to the destruction of lower life forms, but not the destruction of human cells. So I was wrong. I got the opposite. In addition, he found that plants acceptable to individual bonds with men. Their being has something to create a personal bond. When someone is fond of a plant, then that relationship is thereby formed. That's interesting. He sets up an intercommunication which causes something so that this connection can be formed and I guess determined scientifically. This is really crazy. And that's Baxter. I'm glad you know more about him than I do. Yep, Baxter. Then it goes into the shrimp experiment. Here we go. In one experiment, the plants responded to the death of some shrimp that were placed next to them. In an expanded sense, it almost seems as though the plants are the nervous system of an immense planetary organism of life. It is as if the plants are responding so the cut in the body of life can be mended. Interesting. So it also talks about the exchange of information and some of these really
I just have to mention, this was the predominant theory in the Middle Ages, the organismic theory, part of the great chain of being, that everything was connected to everything. So now we're rediscovering ideas that people had hundreds of years ago, but may have not had any evidence to, back up.
And it gives credence to a lot of different theories, like the morphogenic field.
Yep.
Also connects us to the oneness. Everyone always talks about the source. There was a recent report on the results of a scientific attempt to incorporate a chimpanzee into his family and teach him sign language. He considered himself human, but when he was returned to the chimpanzee group and later asked to describe them, it is reported that his signs indicated that he thought they were insects. Is the chimp more than a chimp now? Perhaps a chimp man. The relationship concept would indicate that he is now an organ in the organism called family. Oh, so it's just very bizarre stuff. A lot of different levels of weird stuff here.
Again, what sort of Desmond Morris? Remember The Naked Ape? That book?
Oh, wow. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's him.
I mean, Morris' argument being that we're mostly animal with a brain, and we think of ourselves as, you know, these kind of exceptional humans, but he points out to us how much of our behavior is still based in an animal type of behavior.
Which is very logical to assume.
Again, whose document is this? Is this someone wrote a theme paper for?
I think this was a threat analysis by.
There's some stuff. Wow. Changes in blood flow as a result of binary telepathic information above mean expectancy. What place does this? What place does?
I don't know what that word is either. I'm going to tilt up a little here.
Oh,
Russians
here.
report.
Soviet Rev. The density of time around. Okay, stop.
This is weird.
Think about space-time metric engineering. Because we're told that these Tic Tacs and other vehicles at terahertz frequencies with metamaterials affect their refraction index, double negative materials that refract, light in a way that can make them be invisible, blue shifts, all that, And now you see something here called, essentially the density of space and time becomes a little more malleable. And now you have another statement here saying the same thing in relation to ESP. So we've got the ESP UFO link here.
Big time. It connects that Ben Rich statement where I think of consciousness.
Right.
If psychic powers are bending space-time and spacecraft are bending space-time, they would have a connection. This is stunning stuff.
Right. He did say to someone, or was it Dr. Eric Walker, who said, unless you understand ESP, you don't have any hope of understanding the UFO phenomenon.
Yep.
So again, it has to do with space-time malleability, which for most of us seems pretty fixed, but for materials operating at terahertz frequencies, metamaterials, refraction indexes change, then you get kind of a shift in the density of space-time. It becomes more malleable. You can speed it up, slow it down, and that's, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's what Hal Puthoff is referring to as space-time metric engineering.
There's some interesting stuff here with Hal as well. I think that this one might not be the Hal one. Let me just check. I got a couple Ingo things here from the CIA files. This one, I guess we'll find out right now, might be the Ed May one. Yes, this is the research done with Ingo and Ed May at Maimonides Medical Center, and it was about a noise-driven random number generator, and it worked on that white noise and did a calculation that was random. And Ingo Swann was off the charts in terms of consistency in producing very large anomalies in the statistical spread. So
I'm just wondering here, is this before he worked with Gertrude Schmeidler at?
I believe this is afterwards. I believe because it's with Ed May, so he would have met him at SRI. That would have been a few years afterwards.
Right. This would have been later on.
So it talks about the numbers and how well they did and all that stuff. And Ingo did great.
There's Ed. Look at that. Oh, wait, we have a date there. 76. So now we know.
It's fine. It goes crazy.
I didn't know Ed worked with Maimonides Medical Center, but that's out in what borough of New York City is that in?
I thought it was in Brooklyn. I think it's Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, yeah. So that's interesting. So now we have more institutions that are connected. That's after Ingo started working at SRI. Yeah.
So remote sensing, remote influence of physical
Oh,
sensing.
New York Media American Psychical Society. Got it. You know, buddy, there was a time when this was more open. There was a chapter of the AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science, that was formed by Margaret Mead. And who was it with Margaret Mead that formed the parapsychology subsection of the AAAS? So there actually were presentations about this at AAAS meetings. Now, I've been a subscriber to Science Magazine, their magazine, for more than 2 decades, and I still haven't seen a single article related on psi since I've been a subscriber in the 90s, which is like going back a long time. I've never seen a single psi article, but apparently in the 60s, Margaret Mead, from, again, going back to that statement a few documents ago about how psychic functioning is related to the culture, Margaret Mead must have come across this working in the Pacific with the Pacific Islanders. It must have been something that they mentioned to her. She got interested in it or something. I mean, maybe someone knows more about it than I do. And she formed a parapsychology subsection with another researcher. And so it was more open. And here we have, a document from the American Psychical Society in New York City, and they're doing these tests. And yet, almost in our time, you don't see universities doing this very much anymore.
No, you don't. You don't. I mean, I just did a couple episodes ago. I'm going to go grab another document really quickly here to show you something if I can on something else. Let me see if I can get away with this really quick. Videos. I don't think I will, because it's going to take me a few minutes. But the bottom line is there have been so much research done into this topic over the past 30 years or 50 years, it's ridiculous. And if you go back into the early 1900s, they did dice studies for almost 100 years on this stuff. This is well studied, well understood, well proven. And we know some facts if you really, really look at it. We know it's a low statistical phenomena. It's not massive swing, of reality. It's not a massive, defiance of reality. It's a low statistical, low power phenomena. We know some other things about it, that it happens to have a statistical kind of spread. We think it might have something to do with entropy, blah, blah, blah. But do we really freaking know anything? I don't know, Doc. It seems like it's still a mystery 100 years after still studying this. We know it's real, but the mechanisms and everything else, wow. This is another one. Let's see who this is for. This is a CIA report. ESP and general psychic research has been of interest, and at times certain defining operations in both public and private, difficult to access, private inbred and difficult to evaluate. Let me just go through a couple things here. To study objectives, to determine the status of ESP and psychic research, and to study applications of these findings. See, just what we were saying, it had the acceptance in the 60s and 70s. It was okay to research psychic phenomena back then. We were more.
Yeah, it says right there, AAAS had articles appearing in their publication Science.
Just what we were saying.
And then it all came to an end. It all stopped. Now, okay, did it stop because the scientific community found it to be hard to swallow, or did the intelligence agencies encourage them to stop publishing these because they didn't want the information getting out because they considered it a national security threat?
Well, let's continue reading and find out.
We'll find out, yes.
I don't know. But, it's a great question. Of course, they say here that Newsweek and Time and a couple other magazines have done a couple things about it, but that was only on the heels of the Stanford research. This is still way back then. No one's doing stuff on this. And I think you ask a good question. Is there suppression going on of this issue, like there was the UFO issue? The Department of Defense publicly commented on the research, downplayed it. They downplayed ESP at the end of the Stanford program. But they knew, and we know that they knew that it worked. So let me just go to the conclusion of this one, if there's an interesting conclusion here. Contributions of the study. Let me just see real quickly. I'm sorry. Okay, this one just seems really weird. I'm sorry, but my mouse going crazy here. I think the viewers are going to be very frustrated with me and hate me. Probably send me hate mail. So this is another bizarre document. Oh, it's giving us an approach to it, I guess. It should be studied. Oh, listen. Okay, here we go. It should be studied. Literature survey should be done. Interviews with domestic and foreign investigators should be conducted to identify important ongoing projects. Major meetings of parapsychological associations and other associations should be attended and reported on. Appropriate visits should be arranged to examine procedures and methodologies being used by ESP and psychic phenomena investigators. And these findings should be submitted at the end of the project. So I guess they've been spying on parapsychology investigators. Let me just grab maybe one more document. How are we on time here, Doc?
Yeah, we're going to have to wrap it up. We're a little over an hour now, and I know we like to keep it about that length just to, we can always come back to this at another date, but let's look at one more and we'll wrap it up. How about that?
Sure. Actually, I just want to show you a document here. This is not from these secret documents. This is just to show you just some of the many studies that have been done. These are some of the Smidler and Schmidt studies and a wide variety of PK, retrocausality, precognition, retrocognition, research studies and experiments, all of them successful. It's pretty stunning that there's been so many of these. Here's the ones that Dean Radin did. He did a bunch of these. Pear Lab, they found wildly successful conclusions. You know, anyone who looks at psi phenomena now and thinks that it's BS is kidding themselves. They are not rational. If you look at in any rational investigation of the research that's been done, you have to accept if the government right here has said that these are one of our biggest vulnerabilities after studying these phenomena, Doc, we're in a whole new ballgame. It's a whole new groundbreaking, reality-shattering ball of wax here that this ET phenomenon.
I have to agree. I mean, we've been told publicly that there's no evidence really to support this, at least to justify the government's involvement in it, right? This is what we've been told. And yet here we are that they're extremely concerned about it. It seems your documents you're showing us are not just from the 60s, 70s, and early 80s before the, the RV program was canceled.
No, it's 2011.
Some of these are more recent, and it's just, all I can say is it seems like a schizophrenic approach to the subject, because at one hand you have universities who are pretty openly hostile to people that study this phenomena. I mean, you mentioned Dean Radin there, but he was let go from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, I believe. They didn't tell him it was because of psi research. They said he wasn't publishing enough, if I'm not mistaken. But he published quite a bit, and it was because of his interest in this subject. So the people who've put their careers into this have, had a lot of obstacles. And yet, on the other side, the government, you said you gave the figure of $200 million or something has been...
Yeah, at least.
In your video today. So, I mean, this is cuckoo. On one hand is studying it, saying, what are the implications? Let's figure it out. The other hand says, fire anyone who's involved in this at any official science organization, and don't publish any articles about it in any official science magazines ever again. I still haven't seen one in the time I've been a subscriber. Though put up in Target, I currently think they had one earlier in the 70s. But I mean, this is just really cuckoo. And maybe it's just what we should expect from an emerging new paradigm is kind of a chaos. Like they don't know what to do with it.
It's exactly like the ET phenomena. They're suppressing the information over time because it represents a national defense, not only threat, but a area of research that we need to study and understand before the enemy does. It also could have tremendous economic, geopolitical implications. If you control a new power source and a new transportation, all these different things, it's just like the ET thing. It's this revelation about new power sources and new understandings that the government is holding on to. And you know what? We're adults. You know, we're not going to freak out if the government comes out and says, you know, ET, you know, it's not War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds, it was way back in ignorance days, and it was an attack. It's very different nowadays. And the same thing with ESP. The government could come out and say, you know what? The powers of the mind have been proven true. You can heal each other. We can help this be a better world with positive thoughts, or we can make it a worse world with negative thoughts. And your thoughts have more power than you ever knew. And it's not a joke. It's not corny. It's not lovey-dovey, you know, flower hippie, you know, crystal throwing malarkey. This is how reality works. And what kind of world do you want to be? You know, what kind of person do you want to be? It's crazy, Doc.
You're asking us to be adults about this topic, and I don't think we've been adults as a society about this topic. I've encountered hostility myself just bringing this up at parties and places where scientists are around and things, and not everywhere, but you get it sometimes. And yet here is this prima facie evidence that you presented us with tonight and in your video published, you know, earlier today on YouTube, that major national security institutions they know it's real. They've known it's been real. They're concerned about the implications. They're studying what other countries are doing about it. We didn't even get into China. And here on the surface, we're told, oh, there's nothing to it, just keep moving along. Obviously, when I got involved with this in 1996 with Dr. Courtney Brown at Farsight Institute, I could see immediately people were getting results that didn't have any ordinary conventional explanation that I had ever heard about. But there they were drawing the pictures and engaging in this psychic functioning right before my eyes. I couldn't deny it, even if I didn't want to believe it was true, there it was true. But it is such a complex set of attitudes from our society towards this topic, and it's a real mess. And now it's gone into the UFO field because we're told from the people who were at ATIP and who quit ATIP that the military higher-ups don't take it seriously enough. And yet at the bottom of your list here of this on the screen, they say the DoD controls several facilities where activities have been detected. We will leave that for your imagination. There are some movies you can watch about this that recently came out from Jeremy Corbell. But it's like... But
also places like
Maelstrom. Yeah, Maelstrom. I'm looking at these things here, that the threat scenarios, penetration of solid surfaces, censored. You know, this is coming out now because of the Nimitz incidents, and we've had Fravor and Kevin Day and a whole bunch of others now come out saying, yes, this is real. We've seen this. We'll just leave it for this tonight. But again, as we were saying, buddy, there has to be a moment where there comes an aha moment for society as a whole, where society says, oh my God, it's real. Because the credibility of the people it's unimpeachable. And all of a sudden, too many people like Fravors and the Days and the people that operated our Navy flew the planes, operated the electronic systems, the guys in the radar Hawkeye planes above that survey the entire area and coordinate everything are telling us they saw it out the window of their E-3 Hawkeye plane, right? And so I would just imagine that there's going to be a threshold. And then what's going to happen is it's going to bubble it backwards to these topics that you've been showing us tonight that we've known about since the 60s and 70s and 80s. And it's going to be quite a revelation in terms of scientific progress. That's just my gut feeling about it. It's just going to come all at once. It's going to be like a sonic boom of knowledge. Well,
you know, I think you're right. And I think it's going to put all this stuff together for everyone. It makes them bubble backwards to consciousness, and that makes you bubble to this stuff. And then all of a sudden reality itself starts to bubble and change. And thank you for making that ending there so succinct in that observation, Doc.
Well, thanks. No, thanks for presenting these documents. I'm going to have to think about this for a couple of weeks, what you've just presented to us, because again, I thought I would have known some of these from all the conferences, SSE, IRVA, and others. And yet here it's just brand new for me tonight and today. And it just shows that we have been lagging behind the reality of these phenomena. And we're going to find ourselves on reality's edge if we're not careful. So.
I can't think of a better way to end it than that, Doc.
Okay, buddy.
Thanks, everyone. Gang, please leave us your thoughts below.
Yes,
do you think
thanks for watching? Yeah, appreciate it. And we will see you again soon.
And if you think it's a threat, let us know. If you don't think it's a threat, let us know.
Put your comments.
If you have telekinetic powers, don't tell us. Much love, gang.
Okay, guys. We'll see you in the next episode. Good night.